Welcome to Brother Owl's Garden. I'm Brian and I honor your presence here today. And I'm delighted to introduce again, visiting us, my best bud, Bob Belcher, who is coming to us from an undisclosed location in Southwest Turkmenistan. And I'm here in Northern Thailand. Welcome, bud.
Welcome. Glad to be back with you, man.
Well, it's nothing but an honor and a pleasure and a delight to have you. And I really appreciate you sharing on this platform for everyone that will view it. I really appreciate you, and I'm sure I'm not alone on that.
Well,
this is your second appearance on Brother Owl's Garden. And for us to get a little better acquainted with you, Bob, would you let us know just a little bit about your background and what things have you picked up along your path that have led you to where you are now?
I went through Catholic schools, as like I talked about the last time, and was always told that I had a soul, and I had a series of out-of-body experiences, which led me to realize that wasn't quite true, that it's more that we are souls and we have bodies because as I was saying the last time, to have means to be in possession of. So we're not bodies in possession of souls. This happened when I was 22. I was in the Air Force, and you know, I mean, being in the military, I had other things to think about, but it's just really kind of stuck in my head. And then over the years coming back home, I just kept falling across things that were of spiritual nature and importance. And I didn't intend to start going on this quest, but then finally I was there, and I couldn't stop once I was on, because when I did try to stop, I realized I quit all spiritual studies for a little bit, and then realized that my life was profoundly empty without that quest. There was something in me that said I had to keep searching, I had to keep learning, I had to keep growing and understanding. And it's strange to live in such a material world and deal with things that are so esoteric. And so books would come across my path, and I would read them, and that would give me this idea and that idea. And I would take a training course here and end up with a mentor there. And I went through a real intense training course in Dallas with a company called Paradigm Technologies, which no longer exists. And then for 5 years, I worked with Paradigm Technologies here, which it no longer exists. I guess I should quit working for other people. Their company's go out of business.
All things pass.
All things pass, yes. And my journey on this spiritual quest, I did study with the Rosicrucians for many years. And it's interesting to me that many of the things that I studied with them are now common New Age stuff. It's like the secrets aren't secret anymore. And I think that that's actually a good thing. I think a lot of those teachings needed to be put out into the public and not held closely. And I think it's a time for it.
Yeah.
I think that those teachings being out there became important for people to know. And I'm just finishing up reading Dr. Bruce Lipton's book, The Biology of Belief, which I highly recommend. But here's somebody who's now called the father of new biology. And what is he doing? He's scientifically, through science, he found his way to spirituality. And there's many of these books now that are written. I mean, I've got a couple more on the shelf behind me that are scientists who discovered spirituality through science. So in fact, I have a friend of mine who's a practicing atheist who says he doesn't believe in anything without realizing that his atheism is a belief. So,
yeah,
okay, whatever, you know.
Yeah.
So this has been a very long road I've been traveling for 50 years. My God, 50 years. That's startling. And I've read, I don't know, a few hundred books on the subject, but the thing that's the most significant for me isn't the books, it's the experiences.
Sure.
The experiences that I've had that have told me that everything that we hold here as real is only real because somehow we put significance on it, an agreement to it, which is, I know what we're going to be getting into. And it was just an ongoing adventure. I find that my mind works in a way that when I'll get a hold of a concept, I just kind of get into it. It percolates for a while, and then I'll start getting ideas about it, and I have notebooks and notebooks full of things that seem to have relevance.
And which need to be shared, which is what we're beginning to crack open a little bit here on this platform.
And so on this platform, I've been thinking about it since since you first asked me to come on, actually. And I want to put things in bite-sized pieces.
Yeah.
But for any of those who are watching this, they're all related. There's every concept connects into another concept. It supports it, or it's the next step in the understanding of it. And as you know, you and I have talked about agreed upon realities, which is what you wanted me to speak on today. For, I don't know, 10, 15 years, you've been hearing me talk about it. So that's what I thought I would get into for today. And I do find it an important topic. And I think it's something worth exploring.
Yeah, we will be discussing agreed upon realities today, which, gosh, I mean, since I met you on February 11th, 1996.
26 years ago.
We have, Bob and I think we've covered everything in the universe 17 times as far as discussing it over infinite chats, sit downs, and,
cups of coffee and the occasional
cups of coffee, sitting on the lanai, talk story in Hawaii, as they say. And, just a reflection a little bit about some of the things that you've said to us now. One thing you said in the earlier days of your, let's say, your spiritual curiosity and awakening, some of those things that you were delving into, they seem so esoteric and all that. I would say it's because of the way this world is that those things from that view or from that lens would seem esoteric. Because believe me, it's here that's messed up.
It's here that's messed up. That's true.
Yeah, this is the world where everything is upside down and backwards, and we are living in a negative of the photograph of reality. And when you realize that we're living in the upside down, backwards, negative version, I don't mean negative as a value, I mean like a photograph negative.
Right.
When that hits you, you start to identify it everywhere. One quick one. Seeing is believing. Actually, believing is what opens up to seeing.
And so
yeah,
that actually leads into this. I talked about this with actually with my atheist friend, and his thing is, well, I'll believe it when I see it. And I said, well, you don't understand. You won't see it if you don't believe it, because especially in the area that we're talking about, belief opens the door to understanding. Because if you believe it, or at least open to the possibility of, and we're talking spiritual concepts, if you're at least open to that, then you will see them. You'll see that start to be out there in your life or in here in your heart. And you'll start to, you've opened the door for those experiences.
And
so to believe that something exists is the opening of the door. When you believe that they don't exist, what happens is the doors don't exist, the windows don't exist. You're in a hallway that leads to a nice, comfortable room of your own beliefs and your own delusions. And
Yep.
it reminds me of something that one of my mentors says, don't believe everything you think.
Of course not. And I would like to add, Bob, that, yeah, we're using the word believe, but if it would be possible for me to sharpen the pencil a little bit, what I mean when I say that is actually, to use a more accurate term, is non-judgmental openness to the possibility.
I would go there.
Because some beliefs are inaccurate, some beliefs are incorrect, but your willingness to be open to the possibility that it might actually be true and to not resist that,
right,
allows it to reveal itself to you. Whereas if you resist it, you literally block it from being shown to you.
So
You put up a veil.
knowledge comes from empirical data or belief. I mean, or what am I saying? Knowledge comes from empirical data or experience.
Yeah.
You know, if you experience something, it's there. You've had the experience. That's why last time we talked about, you know, I'm not a believer. I'm an experiencer. You know, I don't believe in God. As you said, I've experienced God's presence from within. It was a real, like, oh my goodness. It was a real awakening for me.
Yeah.
But
God is not
because
understood by the intellect. God is experienced by the soul.
exactly.
So as soon as you put
which
the
is
platform of science with the tool of intellect to try to prove or disprove God, you're already using the wrong tool on the wrong platform.
and
it's never gonna
interestingly
resolve.
enough, though, there are more and more scientists that are using that tool to come to God.
Let me
which is
throw
a-
a quote. There's a quote
let
you
me-
made
let
me
me-
think of.
okay.
Well, real quick. If in the beginning of science, atheism makes sense. Deeper into science, you come to realize there is a someone behind this.
Yes, in fact, one of the things that I heard along that line was asking a scientist in the 50s, do you believe in God? I said, of course not, I'm a scientist. When you ask a scientist in the 2000s, do you believe in God? They say, of course I do, I'm a scientist. You know, so you can only believe that which you do not know. You either know it or believe it. I'm not knocking belief, not at all. Belief is a great tool, but you can only believe what you don't know. You either know it or believe it. And the problem with many people is they can't tell the difference.
Good point.
You know, they simply can't tell the difference. And this takes us to the agreed upon realities, because that's really the key of it right there. Either you know it or you believe it.
And I've got to bring Bertrand Russell into this real quick. You know, I can't stop thinking of quotes that you light up when you speak, you know, that relate. I'm going to paraphrase. The problem is that the intelligent people are always full of self-doubt, while the idiots are always so sure of themselves.
I have a lot of commentary on that, which I will not go into. Yes.
Well, we all bump into that every day, especially if you are on the interwebs, you know.
Yes. There we go.
But let's talk about agreed upon realities. But
so truth stands alone. Truth is just what it is.
Mhm.
There's no such thing as your truth, my truth. We talked about that before. I understand where that comes from. I understand the evolution of language. What it really is saying, well, what's true for me? But what it really is it's what I believe, it's how I see the world, it's how I understand it.
Yeah.
That's what's passing, and they're using the word truth. Well, you and I have had this conversation before that when truth is subjective, well, then you can't trust truth because there is no truth.
Yeah, there's only perceptions and understandings of
Right.
what truth is.
So truth stands alone. Truth is just whatever it is. It's that thing. On further reflection, as I was thinking about our interview today, I kind of wonder if the only real truth is our creator. That could be an easy way of saying that, but that's not where I'm going with this. Truth stands alone. Reality requires an agreement. We agree that something is true, or we agree that something is so. So this is where we go into agreed upon realities. And we live in a world full of agreed upon realities. I mean, they're all over the place. The two biggest ones are obvious, which is politics and religion.
Yeah.
And there it is. It's we've run into that. And these agreements are everywhere. And we don't recognize them for what they are.
So I would say, but politics, religion, and culture are three giant ones that will cover the gamut of all other.
It's true, and that's also part of what I was going to be talking about today. There's a thing about that. These agreements, they're not necessarily in and of themselves bad. You know, they are the agreements that hold a society together. They're the agreements that hold a culture together, even a family. But there's some kind of an agreement. And in the teaching that I do, I ask people to look at what they've agreed to, either consciously or unconsciously. I think many agreements we just fall into because we were raised with that agreement. That these are cultural agreements.
Yeah.
And so we just take that on, and that just becomes, well, that must be true because it's what I grew up with. It's what my mom and dad felt.
Yeah.
So
the conditioning package that we're subjected to when we're born, and usually for the first single digit number age, especially. But yeah.
So this is one of the things, though, that this gets deeper, and what it really comes down to, one of the big things about this. All of us are looking for some form of validation, especially the ones who think they're not looking for it. They're really looking for it. We all want to know that we're right. We want to know that we're loved. We want to know that we have other people can share our viewpoints. We can share viewpoints with them. And I believe that it comes from, you know, when we leave home, what we call the spiritual world, which I think is really just another dimension, but when we leave that and we come here, my understanding of that world is that it's a collective. It's like there's this connection. Everybody is connected, and so you hear the thoughts, you understand it, you feel that, and from this place of isolation, identifying with bodies. Your body is there, my body is here, so you must be separate from me. That seems real normal here. But being that we're spiritual beings in physical bodies, having this material experience, there's a part of this for which this doesn't feel normal at all. And there's a part of us that longs for it. That's why we're social animals. That's why we belong to groups. And what happens when we belong to a group? We go into agreement with the values of that group. And this is especially true, again, in religion and politics. And so from this agreement, we find validation in our thoughts. Therefore, we identify with that group. And our identity is tied up in that belief system,
right?
Whatever kind of system that is, you know. Now, I'm not knocking those. I'm just describing that this is the progress of it. Many people also find their employment within that group. So now their identity and their income, their survival, is based on their agreement to that group. And then the third thing is their favorite drug of choice, power. Now, power is the most addictive drug on the planet, maybe even in the universe, but it is incredibly addictive. So now if your identity, your income, and your power base comes through your belief system, and somebody challenges it because they have a different agreement, the result is often usually swift and often violent. I mean, people fly into rage for everything from yelling at you to starting wars. It all starts over an agreement that something is so. I mean, think about it for a second. You know, you asked about my background, and you mentioned lenses. we all have a lens through which we see the world, one or two or three or four lenses, depending on the subject matter. My two lenses, my two big lenses, are spirituality and history.
Mm-hmm.
And I grew up on history, and somehow in my sophomore year, it felt like my history gene turned on. And one of the things that I realized was I didn't have to learn the names and dates. I had to learn the story, and the names and dates would fall into place. And that's exactly what happened. And so part of this library is devoted to history, biographies, and what happened at this time. And so it's history from all over the world. I just find it fascinating. And I cannot think of a single war that has taken place on this planet that isn't about ego connected to an agreed upon reality. We agree that this is this way and you're that way, you're wrong, we're right, we must fight.
Yeah.
That's oversimplification, I realize that.
Well, the
But
details shift throughout each case, but the premise is still that.
Yeah, it's the overall thing that makes it work or makes it happen. So these agreements, they especially social agreements, they do change. You know, they change over time. For instance, if we were to look at the status of women in 2022, as opposed to 1822 or even 1922, it's vastly different because the social agreements have changed. And whatever the reasons are, why it was that way, I'm not getting into that. I'm just pointing out the agreements have changed. And I think that's actually much for the better. If you think about it, a society is robbed of half of its talent if it's sequestering, you know, a portion of the population because of their gender, their color, or whatever stupid reason that we have for, you know, messing with somebody else. They're just agreements. They're not actual. You can't tell me that a woman is less than because of her sex, or a person is less than because of the color of their skin. It's nonsense. It's just nonsense. It's pure nonsense. It's just
no, it's absolute equality without absolute sameness. People have conflated the idea of sameness with equality, which is incorrect.
It's incorrect.
Equal in value, absolutely, not same in makeup.
Things are different.
In nature.
I mean, my goodness, I mean, to relate it to pets, I had 3 Labrador retrievers, you know. One was female, 2 were male, one was half lab and half golden retriever. You remember them. They weren't the same, but they were all equal. Great dogs.
Right.
And, you know, you can't say one is this because of that. That's just nonsense.
Kui, Pua, and Ikaika.
Right.
Beloved souls. I knew them all. And I have to say, Kui was on another level for me. And he's always dear to me. You know that.
Yeah.
So we're talking about these agreed upon realities. And you did an excellent explanation of illustrating how they come into being, you know, and how we can become so personally invested, and not just invested, but ingrained into them, that anything that would come along that is other or oppositional would be perceived as a threat.
Absolutely.
And we're talking about this religious theology versus that religious theology, this political stance versus that political stance, our cultural ways of doing things versus those cultural ways. But I think that we could say that there's something even a little more personal about that, in the sense of self-identification. In other words, the unconscious belief that you are those things, though you can't exist outside of or apart from those things.
Well, that's why I'm saying that it's we identify with it. We take it on as I'm a fill in the blank. It doesn't make a difference what it is. I'm a this. And so this goes back then, if you have agreed upon realities, it goes back to subjective truths, because you can't have a situation where opposition where they can both be right. They can, however, both be wrong. But,
Right.
uh,
Yeah.
and I'm not making a judgment on that. That's whatever that, however somebody wants to hold that.
Yeah.
It's almost amusing to see some of these meltdowns that you see on YouTube going, dude, really? You're upset about that? I mean, how are
Well,
you
no,
so?
I think that provocative things like this are healthy to consider. Your point you just made. Let's put it in the context of, let's say, theologies. It is not possible that all theologies are simultaneously correct, but it is possible that all theologies are simultaneously incorrect, or at least incomplete.
Incomplete
So,
or
so then how are you gonna be one of the, as Bertrand Russell said, one of the idiots that's so sure of themselves? It's always good. I'm not saying to not ever believe anything and to always say nothing is knowable,
no. I think
but
one has to have their personal standards and their and what those things. And I think I don't think that agreed upon realities are wrong. That's not what I'm saying.
Mhm.
I'm simply pointing out that they're there.
And
You
they
see,
shape things.
and they
They are
shape things.
big.
So now here's the thing. You talk about shaping things. This is why it's important to understand that these things exist. And it's funny. I came across an Indian guru guy on YouTube the other day, and he was saying pretty much the same things I'm saying. He just says it differently.
Mhm.
But he's got that cool Indian accent, so he sounds like he really knows what he's talking about. But I think he does. I'm just saying I just found it interesting.
Yeah.
I mean,
If he had a
I'm not the,
British accent, he would be much more intelligent.
of course, but no agreed upon realities there. You know, here's the thing. I don't think that I'm unique or special. I've just taken the time to look into things. I quit watching TV. I started reading books. I started looking at life. You know me, I worked a lot at night. I was in the entertainment business. I mean, I worked at night. I didn't have time for TV. I was working at night, surfing in the daytime, and learning. And I'll tell you, I learned a lot from surfing. I learned a lot from
Absolutely.
the ocean. I
Surfing is
mean,
the best metaphor overall for how to live and move through life that I've ever found. There's just endless metaphor.
I realize that you make really kind of three commitments when you go into the water. The first commitment you make is the realization that this is not your natural place to be.
Mhm,
So you have to make a commitment to being in a different spot.
mhm,
You have to make a commitment to the other people in the water,
mhm,
because actually surfers are all interdependent on each other to stay alive.
mhm.
I mean, and anybody who's, and I surfed for 40 years, so there you have incidents that come up where you are able to help a bud out and make sure that we all get back to the beach safely. And the third commitment you make is to the wave. You gotta ride that wave. And the thing is, surfing forces you to be absolutely present.
There you go.
Because I guarantee you that if you're coming down a wave and you're hurtling toward the beach at 30 or 40 miles an hour and you're thinking about something else, you're going to kiss the reef. It's not
Mhm,
going to be fun.
mhm.
You've got to be absolutely in the flow of it. And so this is also being in the flow of life. And you can't be in the flow of life if you don't understand what it is. And we're not taught any of these things. We're not taught any of these things. There's so much more to it. And so here we are. Here we are, just trying to learn it. And the reason that I think that agreed upon realities are important, it's important to know that they exist and important to understand their mechanics.
Mhm.
And Jim Morrison, who was the lead singer for the group The Doors, he said that if you don't program your own mind, somebody else will do it for you.
Absolutely. It's happening endlessly, relentlessly. There is never a second where it isn't happening. And either
So
you're conscious of it and you choose what you let in and what you don't, or you're unconscious of it and it's just all pouring in.
So along those lines, there is a man named Edward Bernays. He is touted as the father of public relations. and
Oh, I know
which is
about this.
which is what I have my degree in. And he wrote a book called Propaganda. It's up here on the shelf somewhere. And he wrote that book in 1930. So here's a book that was written 90 years ago. It's still in print, and it's still absolutely valid. This was a book that my understanding is Joseph Goebbels, the guy who ran Hitler's propaganda campaign, considered that book his Bible. And that book is the basis for all advertising today.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very relevant. One of the key things in advertising is called number of impressions. It's why do you buy this brand of soap over that brand of soap? Well, because it's been impressed on you so much, this is better than A is better than B, that you grab for the A, even if it's right there, because it's automatic. You don't think about it. People, can't make generalizations. Many people don't bother to really read labels and all that. An example of that, by the way, I was in a store in a Safeway about more years ago than I care to think about. And I was there to get some Tylenol. It was among the things I was getting. And I looked on a different shelf and there was acetaminophen. And I thought, well, why is this one $2 more than that one? And I looked at the labels. They were identical. I mean, everything was absolutely identical. Then I realized the bottle was identical. The design on the labels were identical, but the labels themselves were different.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a sneaky feeling that both these medications are made by the very same company.
Yeah, because
So,
their 2 or 4 year, whatever it is, patent had run out on the right for others to produce the same formula, and so they probably said, "We'll be our own competition."
we're just, yeah. And so, hey, from a business view,
Probably what
shoot,
happened.
it's brilliant. But what it is, I never bought Tylenol again. I always bought the other one because it's the same thing, but I could save $2 or $3, whatever it was.
Right.
And so it was just an understanding on my part that, there's a game being played here. There's product placement. Where is it put on the shelf? So it's right at eye level. All this is designed to get you to buy. All of this is part of our commercial world.
Which is more
So,
upon realities.
so now, if we take that same concept and instead of selling soap and pain reliever, we're selling ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Now look at how the game changes.
Yep.
Now, I'm not going to get all political or anything. There's no point in that. Most people, or many people, know that all the major media, I think 90% of it or something like that, is owned by 6 corporations with interlocking boards of directors. It's easy to find out.
Yeah.
It's basically one corporation with 6 faces. This is, I think, common knowledge. I don't know. There may be 2 people out there who will see this and go, "Oh my goodness, I didn't know that." But what it comes down to is if there's a consistent message being put out and you don't know about agreed upon realities and you don't know how the game works, then you are totally going to be the person that's imbued with that message and I'll start operating out of that and go into an agreement of a reality that may not exist or may want to be manifested.
And may I give you the example of that that's directly tied to Edward Bernays? Edward Bernays is the one who was behind the campaign to get women to smoke cigarettes. He did this by accentuating the masculinity of smoking, which at the time in the cultural, social context was considered a very masculine thing. And so what he did is he amped up the desire to do what men do in the minds of women. And therefore, smoking, if you pick up a cigarette and smoke, which was very unladylike in the past,
Yes.
well,
Yes.
then now you're exerting your right and your freedom and your feminism to. And so what he did is he duped them into smoking as a way of exerting that they are just as powerful as men and everything else. And behind all of the women's liberation movement was actually the intention to get the other half of the population to pay taxes. So if we could get as many of the population as possible with the women not employed in taxable occupations. If we can get them to come over into the workforce, they are now taxed. They are now being drained of taxes. So with all due respect to women, they are the most common target of these kind of social reengineering campaigns. And the purpose, they were duped into thinking it's all about, I don't need a man, I'm independent, and all that. Great. Look what happened. Now they are all being taxed, and they're stuck in the workforce that some of them would rather not be in. But social reengineering upon,
Yeah, my thing with the women's movement is that I think it was important. I think it was important for women to be able to be treated as equally. I mean,
Absolutely.
it's ridiculous not to. But the only issue that I had with the movement itself is it made women wrong for wanting to stay at home and be a mother. The thing about the movement should be open the opportunity. Don't say, because to say that, oh, you're wrong, because I heard women talk about this. That's how I didn't even realize that was going on. So this wasn't something I made up. It's what women have told me. And I thought, gee, it should be about having the freedom to go out and work or the freedom to stay home. This was something that to me was
freedom of choice.
Freedom of choice. That's what it is. For my mother, she was a very independent woman, and she worked her whole life. And then she and my dad got together, and she continued to work. They did something I thought was brilliant. They banked 100% of her income, and they lived off of his. And then when they were ready to buy a house, they had cash. Because of how they played their financial game. We weren't rich, but we certainly were well. We lived well. And so why? That's because of thinking of proper use of not getting stuck in, oh, you're this or that. So when the women's movement came along, I was kind of naive because my mom worked. Then when I was a child, she was home with me. And
let's not forget that moms are working. That's
like being a mother. Oh my God. I'll tell you what, when I thought, gee, my daughter didn't come with an instruction manual. This was a lot of work for all of us.
Yeah.
It's okay. It's what it is. It's the idea isn't to be made, like Mr. Mom. If you're a guy and you want to stay home and take care of the kids, and the mom can make more money because she's better, whatever it is, she can make more money doing it. Hey, go for it. The idea is to have the freedom of choice, the freedom of opportunity, is to not be denied because you're a fill in the blank.
Right. And, it's, so what we started with was an agreed upon reality, let's say from turn of the century, where women belong at home, that kind of a thing. And then there was this deliberately socially engineered new agreed upon reality. However, as I mentioned, it had a sinister agenda behind it, which most people were not aware of. But then that was a deliberately engineered agreed upon reality. And now, maybe after a century of that, maybe now it's coming to center. The fulcrum, the pendulum is maybe finding its balance with after having denounced the quote unquote stay at home mom and demeaned what role she plays in our society. Wow, that was wrong. Now we can afford her the same amount of respect and appreciation as someone that goes out and works at another place. I mean,
really, in my home and in other homes that I was with, it wasn't just me, it was the other kids in the neighborhood. I watched what their moms did. They ran the house. They had 1, 2, 3, 4 kids. That's a lot of work. Plus, there's balancing the finances and making sure the bills get paid. And there's making sure that this is a full-time job being a mom. In fact, the thing is, a man works from dusk to dawn, and a woman's job is never done, something like that. I forgot how it was, but it's true. So, to not hold women as a equal status is ridiculous.
If you can't get past that at this point, we can't talk to you. But I'll just close the whole women aspect with saying that I absolutely revere beyond words my own mother, who I've always referred to as the mortar between the bricks that
Mhm.
holds the whole place together. I mean,
I
I
think you
can't.
could say that for society.
Yep.
I think I think that women hold such an incredible place in our society
Yeah.
because of that, and they're largely unacknowledged for it.
Yeah.
And my summation on that is that we have men and we have women, and there's a reason that we're created like this. We're
Yeah.
created to be together. Well, nowadays, let's just say that people are created to be together. I don't want to get into that whole
Well,
vast.
and male and female is complementary while equal.
Yeah,
They're
yeah,
complementary, at least in the ideal. But if things get forcibly turned in opposition against each other, well, then everything gets torn apart, which we can see happening.
right.
The other area of possible contention, a dangerous thing, is religion. So the agreed upon reality concept as applied to religion, look at what extremists, for example, Islamic extremists are doing today, and how that matches what Catholic extremists were doing, several centuries ago.
Oh, yeah.
You don't think like I do. You have different beliefs than I do. You need to die.
Right. And
And
the Catholic Church during the Inquisition, they talked about the Spanish Inquisition. Oh, it was 500 years, but there's 300 years in the rest of Europe. It just lasted an extra 200 years in Spain. And the Catholic Church murdered up to, the estimates run as high as 19 million people. Now, what happens when you do that? That puts an institutionalized trauma into a society, we'll call it European society. And it gets to where, well, you better go to church because you know what they did to grandpa. And then several generations down, it's just, you got to go to church, and you just got to, and all that stuff is brought into the new world as part of the ethos of the new world, is the agreement. It gets kind of hard to undo that thing. And it's all based on power. It's based on power and then greed. I mean, here's a church organization that had its own armies. I mean, that's kind of
But
different.
I think that we can also see that things can and do change, because the Catholic Church of today is not that church.
No.
And
And I went through Catholic schools, and I got to tell you that in the schools that I went to, they totally talked about it and talked about how wrong it was.
that's great.
My experience in Catholic school was that they did not shy away from their own sin. I admired that. I really did. And I felt that I got a good education out of it.
To be morally accountable is the highest bravery and courage in my mind. I speak, well, I guess it's okay to say my father is an absolutely staunch agnostic. And
Wow.
in my earlier years, with the Roman Catholic conditioning that I underwent, sorry,
Mhm.
Mom, that had a tremendous, that caused a great impact on me, because coming from the agreed upon reality that I was subscribing to at that particular time, and then through that lens to view my father's stance, I was gravely worried about him. And I meant well. It was the sincerest of
Oh,
concern,
yeah.
but it required a lot of blind spots on my part, a lot of ignorance in my own understanding to take that stance and to maintain or perpetuate that stance about his beliefs. And as I've come around in my ongoing, as you know, we're never done. This is never done. The lotus is like the Mandelbrot set, the fractals. The lotus is perpetually unfolding to us. We're never done. But where I'm at right now, I honor my father's staunch agnosticism, because he is being intellectually honest and accountable.
Mhm.
He is being morally authentic.
Mhm.
He's
Yeah.
not saying, well, I believe this or that, even though in my heart I kind of grapple with that. I really don't believe that. There are certain prayers that I can't say anymore, because they declare things I can't subscribe to anymore. So I can't say them, because that would be sacrilegious in my own view. because that's not true for me. So I can't rattle that off anymore.
Mm.
I can't parrot that memorized rote prayer anymore because it says this is, and it's not authentic.
And the rote prayers, but prayer is a very powerful tool, but it needs to come out of your heart. It needs to
Exactly.
be your words. It has to be your words.
Yeah.
I think my dad really helped a lot. I remember a conversation that he and I had sitting out in the backyard on the ground, just hanging out talking. And we were talking about these things, and I might have been 11, 12 years old. I don't know what it was, and he said, well, we're talking about the church and the Catholic school and all that. And my mom was a non-practicing Catholic, and my dad was a non-practicing Protestant. But he used to say, you don't live or die by what they say. He says, take what works for you, look at it. If you want to adopt it, go ahead. If you don't.
Your dad, whether he knew it or not, just paraphrased the Kalama Sutra of the Buddha.
I don't think he knew that.
Well, because truth is truth, and it comes to us all. And when it came to the Buddha, he spoke to a village in India, which was called Kalama. And he was asked, I'm paraphrasing, of course, but he was asked, like, how do we know exactly what to believe, generally speaking? And the Buddha said, and the way he closed it is beautiful. He said, do not blindly accept or ingest into your belief system anything, no matter where it came from, even if it came from the most sacred scriptures, even if it came from your endlessly traceable lineage and ancestry, even if it comes to you from authority figures in your village, and even if it comes to you from me. Instead, test it out for yourself, practice it, see if in your direct personal experience of practicing, if this thing shows itself to be true. And if it doesn't, reject it, even if it's something I taught you. So what I love about that is the Buddha put aside even any clout of his own being in what people ought to receive as true. It put it into practice, test it out. That's what your dad just said. He didn't, maybe he didn't consciously know. He just paraphrased the Kalama Sutra.
I was teaching a class many years ago, and I said in the class, I said, I'm not asking you to believe anything, even me.
Right.
I don't want you to believe me. I want you to take in what we're talking about here. If it works for you, explore it. If it doesn't, reject it. Because I felt my job was to expose my students to concepts and ideas that weren't running around loose in society, to think outside of their agreements, of their realities, and think past that. And I remember this one woman, I was talking about the Earth School, which we've talked about before, and that's another video. But I said that we choose our family, our race, sex, country, everything. We choose that before coming here. It's kind of like sitting down with a guidance counselor and finding out what's the best thing that's going to work.
Right.
Well, we went on break shortly after that, and boy, she confronted me, and she was not happy with that. And I said, what's going on? I said, well, you said that we choose everything. She said, I wouldn't choose to be a woman. I wouldn't choose to be Black. I wouldn't choose to be poor. I wouldn't choose this, and I wouldn't choose that. And I looked right at her. I said, of course not. I said, but you, the person you are today, isn't the one who made those choices. Who made those choices was you before you came here, and you made those choices based on the lessons you needed to learn, which would further your spiritual development.
Yeah, that's it. What set of parameters serves you for the lessons you are coming here?
Exactly. And so it's like I watched this chip fall off her shoulder, and she invited me over to her apartment for tea. And a few days later, I was there, and she was showing me the fabrics that she made. And she told me that once she grasped that concept, that she was able to let go of so much anger anger in her life because
Yep.
she saw it from a different perspective.
Mhm.
And I just shared with her my understanding. It's how I've learned it. It's how I say I learned it. I learned it through my experience. I didn't learn that in a book. I understood
Right,
it because
right,
it was presented to me.
right.
And so I call it just I c- I refer to as going to boarding school. You know, you're home, you have your home personality, you're who you are at home, and then you go off to boarding school,
Mhm.
and you have to adapt to the reality of your boarding school, and you take on the persona of being a student, and you do the student things, whatever that is, and then you let go of that, you graduate, and you go back home,
Yep.
and now you're back to your original personality with the knowledge and learned lessons that you gathered from being at school. And that's why I
Yep.
refer to a lifetime as a semester at the Earth School.
I love it. And to reflect that directly back onto agreed upon realities. Now, some people do not believe in transmigration, reincarnation, whatever. Okay, fine. That's where you are right now. That's valid. Be blessed. I absolutely do. And when you understand that you basically chose your avatar, the earth suit, this body, I happen to choose a dashingly handsome bearded guy to be. But anyway, what I understand, especially if you read, there's a book called Babies Are Cosmic. I've been trying to get the author to come on. We'll see what happens. But it talks about this whole phenomenon of choosing where on the earth you're going to live, to what parents. And it's not necessarily, I need to choose to be this shade of brown or this shade of pink. It's not that. It's what life is this avatar going to experience that I need to slide into and be in that situation? What's going to best serve what my soul needs? Now, if you take that understanding and couple it with what I believe is the factuality of, technically the word is transmigration. The soul comes back and incarnates many, many, many times. What in the world is all this nonsense about racism and anti-racism and this race and let's favor this race and let's smother this race? It's insane. You've been them all. You've been them all, and you are
And
none of them.
you're all part of the same energy anyway. You're all part of God's energy. So
Yeah.
here's the thing. Here's the thing. This is a school. There's only one degree program, and that's in love.
Yep.
And there are times that you have to learn what something isn't to fully appreciate what something is. So
Okay.
all these things, even hate, anger, the most vicious thing possible you can think of, have some kind of a thread that goes back to love. It could be the opposite. It could be the full-on experience. It's whatever it is. But there's times when you have to really understand the bigger picture of it all. And that's why when we talked about the 5 values of civilization, it starts with respect, it ends with love. And my wife pointed out something interesting. I was seeing it linear. She said, well, it's a circle. Because if you start with respect, you go to truth, and then you go to trust, and then you go to cooperation, and then you go to love. Where do you go? Back to respect.
I'll accept circle, but I'll offer the possibility of another dimension that is a spiral, and you either move
That
upwards
works.
in realization or you move downwards in your energy. But yeah, the whole thing that we're confronted with now, all this nonsense. I mean, I hope everybody is completely sick of it by now. But this whole racism thing. Look, as I said before, you've been them all, and
Been
you
them
aren't any of them. In
Well,
this
here's
particular lifetime, you're that one. In
right.
countless others, you were the. Don't identify
But
with the race
race,
of your avatar body.
right. Uh, Race is being used as a tool for division. They're talking
That's what
about
I meant when I said
it's
I
a
hope
tool for unity, but it's actually a tool for division.
Yeah.
And the ones who really are promoting that, they don't want people to come together.
Yep.
I think they're terrified of
Yep.
people coming together.
Yeah.
And if if because I mean, my goodness, I've been around people. I don't know if there's any culture that I've never. I mean, there's 26 languages and cultures here. There's there's so much here that I grew up in diversity before I even knew it was a word.
Right.
You know, I
Yep.
had no idea of it, but I mean, I had no idea that there wasn't diversity. And then as I got older, it's like, whoa, that really shocked me. And
Yeah.
especially seeing the drama on TV when I was a kid and seeing all this, all the pictures that you've seen in
Yeah.
the news 60s.
Yep. And you know,
Um,
Bud, you hear this all the time. Diversity is our strength. Okay, that's another lie.
Unity is our strength.
Diversity, I'm going to say it this way: harmony of diversity is our strength.
Oh, and by the way,
Unity is an equally
you
good word.
said a word. I just want to put this out to your audience.
Yeah.
I want to put this out. I hear people praying for world peace. I want you to know I never pray for world peace. And the reason that I don't pray for world peace is because world peace can be enforced by the most draconian of means. There's ways to make people peaceful, and you're stepping on them to do it.
Mhm.
I pray for world harmony,
There you
and
go.
peace is a natural result.
There
of
you
that.
go. There you go. Amen.
When you said harmony, I had to share
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Diversity is not our strength. Harmony within the diversity is our strength,
What it
and
is,
the unity therein.
and I'll take it a little bit, maybe drop it back a notch. I think unity is our strength.
Okay. Well, we're talking about the same thing.
We're talking about the same thing, but I mean, unity, it's a country that is unified is strong. A country that is broken apart through its drama and this thing and that thing becomes weakened.
So,
So
but in concluding about agreed upon realities, now that we've examined these things in their different contexts of culture, religion, politics, all those other categories, now that we've brought this into our consciousness, we can't be as susceptible to the effects of the deliberate reprogramming of agreed upon realities that's being deluged
exactly.
upon us. So how do we take this new awareness into spiritual practicality, everyday life? What does that look like?
That's actually a really good question. One of the things about it is to first understand that agreed upon realities exist. Second is to ask yourself what you've agreed to.
Mm,
Where are my agreements?
mm.
Examine inside, because if you're able to understand your own thinking, because it's our own mind that blocks us from our spirituality.
Mm.
It's our own beliefs that block us. As we said, I kind of hate using the word God because it's got so much stuff attached to it.
It's
But
charged.
it's a charge. Yeah, I mean, it's everybody's, oh my God, and this, forget that. It's like, I think we can safely say creator. And
I like to just say divinity with a capital D.
the divinity within us.
Divinity.
And so I think it's difficult. I'm not going to say impossible. I think it's challenging to really fully embrace the divinity within us, and therefore the divinity within somebody else. I mean, that's the whole greeting. If we're caught up in an agreement that this situation is not tolerable because it doesn't fit this picture, and these people aren't tolerable, and you're making less of people because of the agreements that we hold that this is good and that's automatically bad. And I think we have to understand this process as a way of growth in our own spirituality. I think that we have to look at how do we break away from the programming, whatever that programming is. And I don't care if it's religious programming, political, historical, culture, I don't care what it is. It's programming.
Yeah.
Now, it's so easy to get into different areas of this, because once you're talking about this agreed upon reality, then there's there's, it opens a door for bigger discussion on a wider variety of topics. And I'll touch on one which I'm a little reluctant to because of time, but if you're caught up in an agreed upon reality, you can't see the game,
Right.
the game that exists. What's a
Right.
game? A game is an activity with players, a playing field, rules, objectives, and a way of keeping score. That defines a game. And I used to think of it as games, oh, fun thing, we'll go play a game, play some cards, play some football, whatever, it's a game. But we mentioned Brother Ed last time when I came home from service. Brother Ed gave me a book called The Game of Life and How to Play It. And it was really the first spiritually oriented book that I had read. And it really opened my eyes to a new way of looking at the world. That was my entry point into that. Just remembered it. So thank you, Ed, again.
I'm trying
And
to remember that woman's name. That book is from 1922 or something.
something like
I've
that.
forgotten her name, but I also highly recommend Florence something. Gosh, I wish I could remember right now. But The Game of Life and How to Play It. You can find an audio narration for free on YouTube of that book. I recommend
Well,
it.
there you go. Well, apparently he had got it at Unity Church, and he recommended it to me. And I think I went. I don't know if I think I went down there and I bought a copy. He said, "You got to read this book," and I went down and got it. So, but here's the thing: life is a game. It's made up of subsections of games, and people don't really understand that they're playing games. And in one of the trainings I went through, is pointed out to list all the roles that you play. You know, well, for so many minutes a day, you're a chauffeur. Well, you take your kids to school or soccer practice, and you might be a chef for so long. And you might be this. Start looking and breaking down your daily activities into roles, and it helps one to understand more. What you're not doing anything different. You're just understanding it from a different perspective.
Mhm.
But there is also an overall game that's played on the planet. And this is why it's so important to understand what this is. The game is the game of power.
Yep.
The objective, the prize, is our free will. The strategy is to get us to give it over freely. And that's why, if you understand that that's the game, if you can look at what's going on in the world today through that kind of lens, then you marry that up or join it up with agreed upon realities. You start looking around and going, hey, wait a minute, what's really going on here? What am I participating in?
And what is
What
the
do I really
currency?
believe? Pardon me?
What is the currency?
The currency of power?
Yeah.
There's two currencies, fear and guilt. You either make a population fearful or you make them feel guilty.
Yeah.
Either way, once you do, you control them. It's that simple.
By the way, in reference to the book, The Game of Life and How to Play It, the author is Florence Scovel Shinn. So it was Florence. I just couldn't remember her last name, but yeah, recommend that. We can see all of this playing out very plainly. I cannot imagine that anyone cannot see it yet. And as they're saying, these days there's no conspiracy theories, there's just spoiler alerts. So the amount of this game being so in your face prevalent, and a very timely phrase to use is the masks have come off.
Interestingly
it's
enough,
unbelievable how easy it is to see now.
interestingly enough, there was a astrologer about, I don't get into it too much, but roughly 15, 20 years ago, who predicted during this time that the masks would come off, that the truth would start being revealed.
Mhm.
And I think, go back to agreed upon realities. I think the ones who can't see it are the ones who are holding onto their agreement so tight they don't dare let go, because if they did, it would invalidate them.
There you go. And that is our closing point.
There it
Those
is.
who cannot see, what do they say in the song "Everything is Beautiful" by Ray Stevens? He says, "There are none so blind as he who will not see," who cannot see. The people they will not see. They're more blind than those who cannot see. And I'm not trying to establish either of us here as some kind of prophet or anything. It's just become so darned obvious that
It's obvious.
at this point, those who can't see it, I'm sorry, they are choosing not to see it.
They're going to be part of the recycle program. I mean, what can I tell you? You're just
Yeah.
going to have to come back and do it again, you know, till you figure it out.
Yeah. And on that note, we close with today's topic of agreed upon realities. And I love you, Bud. And I thank you so much for sharing so freely and ubiquitously of yourself. It's just like having a chat out on the back lanai, you know, and I just love having you around, and I'm sure that I'm speaking for all of us who have enjoyed viewing this episode today on Brother Owl's Garden.
Thank you very much, Brian. I appreciate the opportunity to come on and share.
I'll have you on as often as you want to share, Bud. This platform is yours.
Thank you.
I remind all of us in closing that each of us and all of us are sovereign, individuated emanations of the divinity from which we have arisen.
It's true.
Let's be it. Let's be it.
Mhm.
Thank you all.